in the corner.
Where did you go? Oh,
Oh,
there.
I'm back. You see me? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So we are gonna get started. Oh my goodness me. I like to
Child,
have people that join me from like all different sides of the planet. And
that's
today I have a
amazing.
wonderful, dope, dope ass woman who's joining me today. Samantha, all the way from where are you at? Houston?
Oh, child. No, Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas. Samantha
C-Town.
from the Real Girlfriend Experience. Yes, yes,
Ew,
yes.
yes, indeed. Hello, everybody. It is
How,
about time, child.
yeah. I was working up to it, trying to,
I
come
know.
around to. We're
Way
still new.
overdue.
I'm in my infancy still.
It's okay. We are here today.
Absolutely. And I'm so, for a whole bunch of reasons, I am honored and blessed to have you here doing the shimmying. So
See?
we're going to cover a relatively sensitive topic. But outside of that, I think just you and I, our personalities and the way that we gel. Once the sensitivity is done, we're going to have some fun and just kind of talk about, all the things that you have going on. Your fantastic jewelry. Can we talk about the jewelry? Like, we're going to talk about the jewelry, right?
Of course.
Okay, so we're going to talk about all these wonderful and fantastic things after we talk about the sensitive subject. So before we do all of that, please properly introduce yourself to everyone.
Hi, everyone. This is Samantha, the lifestyle creator of the Real Girlfriend Experience. Ow. Formerly a co-host of Dualistic,
Yes,
because I'm sure there are some listeners that are familiar with Dualistic.
yes.
I'm just out here, just here. Hey.
Amazing. Okay, okay. And tell everyone just so they have a sort of an overall rundown. What is the Real Girlfriend Experience?
It is all things girlfriends. So the Real Girlfriend Experience started as a tiny thought in me and my friend's mind. And so we had a YouTube channel, but then that just was a whole lot of editing and all that stuff. So then I was like, okay, well, let's make it a podcast. And so the podcast is like I have guests that are my friends. And so
Yes.
we share our experiences
Nice.
that we have together. So whatever it is, whatever, it could be when there was no such thing as social media.
That
What
was
did we
that was a
do?
good. I'm sure that was a great conversation. Like, what were people
Yes,
doing?
baby. We
Right.
were still turning the corners, but it just wasn't documented.
Right.
So that's basically what it is. But it's not just the Real Girlfriend Experience is just so much more than what I can envision anyway. But the podcast is that I have different people on that are my friends or just people that I know, and I try to make it comfortable, like where it's just a conversation.
Right. Okay.
There you
Okay.
go.
So today, you and I are going to have an uncomfortable conversation.
Oh,
Um,
Lord.
right. So recently, someone has sent me a video. I actually came to find out that this is an incident that happened in 2009. So 10
Okay.
years ago, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure why it surfaced now, if maybe like there's a court proceeding that's happening, but I believe that this incident took place in 2009. So the gist of it is a young man, 15 years old, confessed to his mother that while he was at his father's house for the weekend, he inappropriately engaged sexually or in a sexual manner with his 3-year-old half sister. And I guess this was weighing on him, and he told his mother. His mother then called his father, and his father came to the house to confront the young man. And the long and short of it is, it resulted in the dad pistol whipping his son, stripping his son, marching his son outside into a grassy area beside the apartment building that he lived in, and putting a bullet in the back of his head and executing his son. He turned himself into the police. He didn't fight. He didn't contest. He took whatever the punishment was that was being handed down to him, he took it, and he didn't really say anything one way or the other. So there's been a lot of debate around the father's response to the young man. Was he, did he have a moment of mental disconnection? Did he just not give a fuck and say that, you're going to end up growing up to be a pedophile, or whatever the case may be? But it also shed light on a bigger subject that we don't talk about, which is sexual trauma and sexual assault in Black families and in the Black community. And I'm not talking about, you see a girl walking down the street, she's got a fat ass, you want to rape her type of sexual assault. We're talking about fathers molesting daughters, uncles molesting nieces, brothers molesting their little sisters, and the mix goes on and on. Aunts molesting their little nephews. So let's not say that it's one-sided, because you do have women who molest the little boys in the family as well. But the sexual molestation within the Black family that we sweep under the carpet and we never talk about, we are talking about it today, in particular as it pertains to this story. So, Samantha, what are
Oh,
your thoughts? I know I
child.
sent you the article and I sent you the video. Yeah.
So I watched the video, and when you sent it to me, I didn't watch it. I watched it yesterday, and I was like, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I don't know if I saw both sides. On one hand, I'm like, okay, he probably saw the colors of the rainbow, like where you just black out and go into a whole nother realm, and did what he did. But I'm just like, he confessed, and then I read that he was on his knees and begging for
Begging for his
forgiveness,
life.
the son,
Yes.
and that he would go to therapy and whatnot. And then like that part of me is like, we should have listened. But you never know what you would do unless you're in the situation.
Right.
I'm not saying that this is tough. What the dad did was wrong. He should not have killed his son.
Right.
But I do know that things happen that will take you there.
Yes.
But you should have had some type of self-control or
Absolutely.
something. I know that the mom and the aunt, I believe, tried to
Yes.
stop him,
Yes.
but he was in a whole nother,
Yeah,
he
he
wasn't
wasn't
even
seeing.
thinking.
Yeah.
It wasn't, and so that's why he probably just was like, I'll take it. I'll go to jail. I'll go to court. I'll turn myself in. It's just difficult. I don't know. There's no right or wrong answer, but I just don't know. I don't know. I know that him killing his son wasn't right. He
Right.
shouldn't have done that. But
But
being
you can
in,
understand how he got to that point.
I can understand how he got to that point because he was at a point of no return.
Right. So when I think about it, much like you, it took me a while to, like, I started watching it, and then when I realized what it was about, I had to stop watching it, because I didn't want to get entrenched emotionally with it. And so yesterday I watched the entirety of it, and then I actually went online and I found the article that I sent you as
Okay.
well. Right, because that gives a lot more detail about what happened. And I don't know, like, I weigh it like this. If it had been an outside person who had molested his 3-year-old and he killed that person, would people be as hard on him? And I get that that's probably not the right comparison, because this is your child and there's a level of sympathy, empathy, love that you're supposed to have for your child. But then how do you weigh that against your other child who is 3 years old, knows nothing except that her brother's supposed to love her and protect her? He's now sexually assaulted her, and now she has to grow up with that. So it's like, I don't know, like, much like you, I can understand how he got to that point where he's just like, you know what, fuck it. I'm protecting my daughter. You've already gone bad. You're 15 years old. You knew that this was wrong. You knew enough to come tell your mom that you knew that it was wrong, but you basically did it anyways. Now you've mentally and emotionally fucked up a little girl who now is going to be scared of boys probably for the rest of her, whatever the case may be, right? For me, had that been my son, I would have reported him and put him in jail. Killing him, no, because you don't have the right to take anyone's life. But definitely, he would be treated, like, for me, he would be treated the way that anybody else would be treated, where you would have to go to jail. You'd have to go to jail, get counseling, whatever services they provide for you. That's on you, because I feel like at 15, you know better and you should do better. You know when you've done something wrong, right? And you and I had a conversation where, I was saying, like, if the person's crying, if the person's saying no, and you actually made a really great point. What if the person doesn't say no? What if they're just silent? Do you still know that it's right or wrong?
Oh my God. So I'm speaking from experience. Not that I've had a sibling, but I had a babysitter. Babysitter supposed to
Yes.
be still protecting me. And I didn't say anything. I didn't say no when it happened.
Hmm.
She was grown, like not grown, but she knew better.
Yes.
And it was a she. And I think a lot of times people don't talk about that either. They always think
Yes.
it's male, female, and vice versa. No, sometimes it's the other way around.
Yes.
And so even dealing with that, that was a lot. And so the other person may not even say anything at
Right.
all because they're terrified and they might not even just say nothing. They just might lay there,
Yes.
not knowing what's going on. And she's 3. She don't know what's going on.
She doesn't. She absolutely doesn't. And when you look at the difference in age, as I said, if he had the presence of mind to, after the fact, go to his mother to say, I did something that I know is wrong, in that moment, you knew that it was wrong. But if she didn't put up a resistance, you're like, okay, well, let me just do this and deal with it after. And sadly and unfortunately, that's the way that a lot of people think. Well, if I don't get caught and nobody knows and she doesn't say anything, then it's okay. That's why they bribe children, right? That's why you always hear, and again, we definitely need to talk about the female aspect of this and women who molest children, because that more than anything never gets talked about.
It
But when you
doesn't.
hear the stories of molestation, the uncle gave, his niece like $5 and said, don't tell nobody, this is our little secret. Like, it's always that it's our little secret. No, you're dirty and it's your secret. That's not a
But
secret for a
then
child to keep.
also, what happened to him? Like,
Right.
I don't, something had to happen to him
Right.
for him to think that it was okay.
Hmm.
But when I was reading it, I guess she was saying, the mom was saying in the court proceedings that he was a good kid, brought home good grades, whoop the whoop, bloop bloop. And then he was being observed as his attitude changed, things changed. He was walking with his head down and stuff like that because he was ashamed. And then I guess that's
Yes.
when he confessed to his mom that he did what he did.
Right.
So I don't know. And then he's not allowed to even get his side of like,
Right.
did something happen? Not excusing it by any means necessary, but did something happen to you for you to do this to your half sister, a
Right.
3-year-old,
Right.
that you thought it was okay
Right. In that moment, he thought it was
in
okay.
that moment?
Right. Because I have let's call him an acquaintance. Um, he was molested by his uncle, from, let's say, he was 10 until he was about 16. And his uncle used to force him to give him head from 10 to 16. So when it started, he said that he was 10, but then after a while, it became routine that there was nothing forced. His uncle would say, come here. They would go to whatever part of the house. He would perform the sexual act on his uncle. His uncle will give him some money, and that was it. So he went from being coerced at 10 to being coached, trained, and the rest was just, this is our rhythm, this is what we do. And it impacted him so much that for the longest time he struggled with his sexuality. He didn't know
Yeah,
if he
that's what I was
was
going to say.
gay, bisexual, heterosexual, and this is something that just happened. He came to terms with the fact that he was bisexual because what ended up happening psychologically to him is when he became an adult, once a month or once every 2 months, he would seek someone out on Tinder or Craigslist to have a sexual interaction with, where all he did was give head to an older man and then go about his merry way. Right. Right.
What? Hey.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I remember having this conversation with him and asking him, because he was adamant that he was hetero. And I said, but you're not, you're bisexual. And he said, no, I'm not. I said, you seek out men to suck their dick once a month or once every 2 months. That is bisexual behavior. There's nothing wrong with it. He's like, well, no, it's just because of past trauma. And he tried to excuse it away. And I kept saying to him, like, you don't need to make excuses. Like, you don't need to rationalize it. You don't need to explain it. You know, if this was something that you were conditioned to do to the point where you enjoy it now, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's no judgment for that. And no one is going to blame you or say, oh, there's something wrong with you because, you know, when you were 10, you were forced to do this. But now that you're 35, it's something that you enjoy doing. You know, the exposure created the behavior, but you have to embrace that that's now part of you because it's not going to change. It's something that you actually desire now because part of your brain was conditioned to do this on a regular basis.
Well, God dog.
Yeah.
That is deep.
Yeah.
That is deep.
There's
Now, I will
so
say,
much.
when it happened for me, my babysitter, that didn't happen for me. I didn't like what happened. And actually, it was me and this other girl that it happened to. And the other girl, I had found her on Facebook, and we had talked about it. And she was like that she herself had questioned her sexuality because of what happened. And I was like, well, child, I didn't. But she was saying that she had in the beginning, but you know, she's okay. So then I'm like, to your friend, did he seek therapy after this happened?
Yeah, so like years after he went to therapy and he explained it to the therapist, and I guess the therapist told him the same thing, like there isn't any judgment on what your choices are because this isn't something that you chose to have happen to you.
Right.
This is something that was forced upon you. This was something that you were conditioned to do. This was something that became essentially part of a weekly routine for you, you know? And if you think about it like but probably a bad analogy, but if you think about it like working out, they say anything that you do consistently for 90 days becomes habit. It becomes
Okay.
routine. And you just don't think about it anymore. It just becomes part of you and you do it. Even if you don't, like, you miss a day, your mind automatically goes back into the routine, you know what I mean? Like muscle memory. So she likened it to that, I guess it was, where she's saying, like, you know, after an extended period of time, your uncle no longer had to pay you or coerce you to do this. He would just give you a look and you would know, oh, it's time to go suck some
It's
dick.
fine.
Right.
Ooh,
So she
Lord.
said, yeah, she said to him that, you know, that it's become part of your psychology. It's become part of your psyche. It's become part of your routine. It's become part of who you are. And at this point in your life, you have to accept it because now it's something that you desire, um on a level that, like, it's not something that can be undone. Like, he's tried to stop himself and he said the longest he's ever been able to go is maybe 2 months, and then it becomes this overwhelming need that he has to do it.
Um,
Yeah. Deep.
yeah, that's very deep. We do
Yeah.
not got time to unpack that.
No,
Wow.
but these are, when you think about the trauma, when you think about, you know, people we mostly focus on the trauma where people are in therapy and they're working to recover it, but then that's the other part of therapy, that you're working to just accept it because it's part of you now, and you realize or recognize that it's something that's not going to change, you know. For you, you understood that I'm not questioning my sexuality, I am not doing women, I'm good. She was
And there's
wrong.
nothing wrong with that.
Right.
However, that is
It
not
just
my
wasn't for
choice.
you. Right.
No, ma'am.
Was she ever confronted? Was the babysitter ever confronted?
No, because I didn't say anything to my mother until I was way in my 20s. Um, And I don't know how the conversation happened. I always just randomly pop off and say something to my mom, and it's like for shock value. And so I don't know if that's what I did. And she was like, "Huh?" But no, I never said anything, nothing at all. And so there are people who don't say anything, and I don't know if that was something that I mentally blocked and
Right.
just get away with, but I never said nothing at all. And in fact, years ago, I had went on Facebook and searched her, and I found her, but I didn't say nothing to her. I didn't add her as a friend. I didn't do none of that. I just wanted to see what does she look like and what is she doing. But
If you
I
were to
didn't.
ever cross paths with her, do you think you would confront her?
I'd be like, girl, what was you doing?
Right.
Now you know that that was not right. That's how the conversation would go. Because I'm not. For me, it. I'm at a space where I'm just like, you know that that wasn't right.
Yes.
It's not traumatic to face her. If we, I don't even know. Like, I wouldn't be able to spot her out.
Right.
Like, if I saw her, I wouldn't know. But because I saw her on Facebook, I just looked at her that one time and then let it go. But I would be like, girl, you know, now you know,
Right.
you were just supposed to be watching me.
Right.
You weren't supposed to do none of that other stuff.
Yeah. Well, you hear so many horrific stories. I remember sort of to go to like another cultural group when I don't know if you remember there was a TV show 19 and Counting, the Duggar
Yes,
family.
yes.
And then it came to light that the eldest son had molested several of his sisters as well as cousins. And the father knew, and the father never turned him in. And it wasn't until I think a couple of the girls came forward for whatever reason. And then, of course, it created this whole big scandal. I
And
feel
like a
like,
lot of times, I feel like some parents do know,
and they
and they
don't say
don't have to
anything.
say anything.
Right.
That's because they've been conditioned. Something happened to them,
Yes.
and then so on and so forth. It goes back
Right.
somewhere that you keep allowing this, and you're quiet about it. There's a reason why you're quiet about it.
Right. So if you had to speculate, the father that killed his son, there was a question floating around as to whether or not that type of trauma had happened to the dad when he was a
Yeah.
kid, and that triggered him to say, we're not doing another round of this. Nowhere, no time. Do you think, if you had to speculate, would you say that that was more of a possibility, or he just broke with reality and said, you know what, 15, 3, you're big, she's small, you overpowered her and took something away from her that she can never get back?
And you know what? He might not even went through that logic. It could have just been like snap.
Right.
Maybe he had other things going on that
Right.
happened to him. Maybe it happened to a sibling of his, a cousin of his. And at that moment, he snapped. It may not have never happened to him per se. He
Right.
could have just snapped. And so he looked at the person in front of him wasn't his son. He saw
A
some
child
random
molest.
person.
Right.
Yeah, period.
Right.
And so he probably didn't even see, like, he just saw something and just went off from there. Nobody could stop him. And he probably didn't even recognize that his name was being called and that they
Right.
were saying, well, no, no, no. Take that back. Because when I read, they were like, the mom and the aunt or something like that was screaming for him to stop.
Yes.
And he pulled
Yes.
the gun on them, like, get away from me, whoop, whoop,
Right.
whoop. But he wasn't, when I say right mind, not that he had a mental disability, right mind, like he was just like, I can picture it. When my mom gets very upset, there's a point where she gets upset and she sees the colors of the rainbow. That's what she
Yep.
calls it. Yeah, see?
Listen to
So,
me. I didn't kill my son, but I've gone to that place where I'm seeing blood red.
yeah.
And I'm like, you are about 2 minutes away from getting a punch in your
See,
face.
your
Back away,
exit came, all right? The exit comes out and
girl.
everything. And so he saw his son as a stranger, right? And so you're Papa Bear and Mama Bear. So when Mama Bear comes out, it's like, I don't care who's in front of me,
Yeah.
everybody's gonna get it.
Yep.
So I feel like that's what happened. I
Right.
don't think there was any rationale.
Right.
He got the phone call. He went over there. He. I don't even think on the phone call was he told what happened.
I
Or when
don't
they got to
believe
the
so. Like
house.
I think that right. I think that the his son's mother, his ex, said to him that there's a situation with whatever the young man's name is. You need to come here. And I think she allowed the son to explain to his dad what he had done.
So that's what happened. So he
And
figured he
but
was
she, and
going to
she
talk
left the
back,
room.
right?
Right. She left the room. So she left the two of them alone to talk. And when
So
she came back,
correct. All hell.
all hell had broken loose.
So what happened was he thought he was probably going over there to talk about some grades or some shit. He gets over there. She leaves the room. Hey, y'all need to talk. The son confesses. He's probably crying, gets on his knees, like, Daddy, I will get help. Whoop, whoop.
Yes. Yes.
He probably couldn't hear anything besides, like, after the son said what he said,
Right.
he couldn't hear nothing else.
Right.
Because that's his little girl, period.
Yeah.
And his son became a stranger because Papa
Yes.
Bear came out.
Yes.
Tell
And
us
when you're right, when you're taking it from that perspective, again, we're not saying that it was right what he did, but when you're looking at it from that perspective, a 3-year-old girl, she's a baby, right? She's not even in June, like she's not even in kindergarten. She's a baby, and he's 15 in high school, which would make him what a junior, a junior in high
yeah,
school,
yeah.
right?
So
At
that's
that
exactly
point,
what happened.
right. At that point, your hormones are well underway. You see girls with breasts and real body, like not real but bodies.
Her
You know what I mean?
body,
Right, a 3-year-old baby, she's smooth like a dolly. Like she doesn't have
yeah,
there's nothing going on,
right,
right? Our
right.
body's smooth like a dolly. You're old enough to know you've got friend. Let's say even if you have one friend, there's social media. Like you are exposed to enough that she's a baby. And even above all of that, she's your baby sister. So at some point for that dad, when his son came, because I believe the little girl lives with the father, because it was his half sister.
Oh yeah, probably so.
So and he had gone there for the weekend. So at some point he was alone with his sister and decided,
Whoop the
you
whoop.
know, whatever it was that he decided. And it's one of those things where it's like, I asked the question, like, what does a sexual predator look like?
Anybody? Like I said, it was my babysitter. It could be anyone. So that's why you just have to be mindful of the spirits and the energy that you allow around yourself, but around your kids
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah. And I empathize with the mother and I empathize with the family of the young man, and there's and again, it's one of those things. Yes, he shouldn't have killed his son. They should have allowed him to get counseling. But and so I'll play devil's advocate for a minute, because for everything that gets swept under the rug, what's the likelihood that they would have sent this young man to get counseling? They would have said, well, he's a good student. It was just something that he went through. It was just a phase, and she's a baby. She's not going to remember anyway. You don't know how these things will mentally, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, physiologically impact that 3-year-old little girl for the rest of her life. You don't know. So when I hear people trying to explain it away, or the focus, like all the focus is on this young man, less people were talking about the trauma that happened to this little girl, because they feel like, okay, well, she's 3. It's not really going to impact her because she's going to grow up and
No,
not
she
remember
need
it.
therapy. I mean, I'm sure that there's therapy for little kids. Yes, there is. So she would need therapy too. I mean, I don't know what or how that would look,
Right.
but she would definitely need it. So, she would need that.
Yeah.
She would need that. That is
Right.
something that she would need. But
Aside,
again, like you said, it probably wouldn't happen.
no. With older people, let's say especially women, because young men being molested gets talked about less, or it's made more into a, oh, he's a boy, it's okay, he's a young man, it's okay, you should feel grateful you got to touch some breasts, or they try to trivialize it that way. But then I feel like for women, young women especially, there's the victim blaming. Oh, she must
There
have
is
been dressed
victim blaming.
inappropriately,
Yeah.
or she must have flirted with him, or she must have done something wrong to cause that behavior. And 8 out of 10 times, the person who's doing the victim blaming is an older woman.
And then if you want to even go deeper than that, I bet you that older woman has had something happen to her.
Yeah, yeah. The way that this is so cyclical, it's sickening. But the thing is, like, how do you break the cycle? Where do you begin?
By talking to your kids.
And what
But
is that
even,
what is that
ooh,
conversation?
I don't know, because I mean, I believe that I can't say that because I was talked to. Don't have nobody touching your little spots,
Right.
and it happened. So I don't know. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Because yeah, you can talk to your kids, but then it still could happen.
Right.
So then what do you do?
Yeah. So I read a study that said 34.8% of sexual assaults, 34, so less than 35% of sexual assaults are ever reported, especially in families.
Because you're gonna get, if you think of it, if I tell that Bobby Joe did something to me, touched me, I'm gonna get ostracized from my family. They're not gonna believe me anyway. Or they probably do believe me, but they're not gonna say anything because Bobby Joe did something to them.
Right.
So it's like a cycle. And like you said, like where does it end?
Do you think there's a level of embarrassment that prevents
Yeah,
people from saying anything?
I believe that there's a level of embarrassment. There's all types of things that go through your head
Right.
that you don't say anything. You think that it was something that you did. That's the first thing. You think, well, what did I do? How did this happen? Like, why did I end up in this situation?
Right.
Even at a young age, those are thoughts that do go through your mind. And so, yeah, you blame yourself and you might blame others.
For not protecting you?
Yeah, I believe that could happen for not protecting you, but you didn't say anything. So how would they know?
Do you feel
Girl,
like there is, okay, so let's say from mothers to their daughters, mothers to their sons, mothers to their children, do you feel like there is something that's, should there be a different type of rhythm where you sense that something's different with your child? So like for in this case with the mother, she said that he was a great student, got all the marks, and then she noticed that he started walking with his head down, his attitude had changed up, but she never questioned him as to what was going on. She never questioned him as to what was wrong. As a
and so that's why we need to be in our children's business. But I think even so, it still could happen, even if you're in your children's business.
Right. Right, because you know what? When they want to do some shit, like we all know when we were kids,
We gonna do.
when you want to do some shit, you're gonna figure out a way to do it, get around it. You'll figure out how to do it, however it is that you feel like doing it or get to it.
I don't know like what the conversation should look like. I know that parents do have discussions like don't touch if somebody touches the no spots, you need to say something. But then there's still situations that it happens even though they were taught, hey. You weren't supposed to touch these no spots.
Right.
So I'm not sure what discussion needs to happen, what other discussions need to happen. Do we need to share our story? Like if we have them at a
Yes.
certain age, at a certain point. So I don't, we can't, well, mommy was touched. You need to tell
Right.
me if you were touched. I don't know. I don't know. That's something to think about. I don't have children. So I don't know if that discussion, how does that look?
Right. I feel like part of the problem is when you know or suspect that someone in your family has done something inappropriate to your kids, because it's your aunt, because it's your uncle, because it's whomever, because it's the pastor of your church.
Ooh,
You don't say
girl.
anything, but even worse than that, you maintain contact with that person and maintain a verbal relationship with that person. So your child thinks, okay, well, what recourse do I have if my mom still talks to the person that molested me? What recourse do I have if my mom is still cool with that person and inviting them to come over for Sunday dinner, knowing what they did and knowing that they're going to do it again when they come back over for Sunday dinner?
And so then I believe, and that's where the child begins to act out because I don't trust my mom
Right.
because you have pastor, uncle, whatever over our house eating with us, and I've shared with you what happened, and you got this person in my face. So I believe, and that's when the child begins to act out in other ways.
Right. So at the age that you were when you told your mom what happened, what was her response? I mean, this was far long after everything had happened, but what was her response?
She was like, Samantha, why you didn't tell me? You laugh, but that's how it went. I'm like, I don't know. And it wasn't like it was an emotion. Again, I'm the child that does shock value. So
Right.
it was just like probably random. Boo, 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 boo. Did you know I was yada blah blah blah?
Right.
I like, where in the hell did this come from? And so it was a conversation, but it wasn't a bad one. She was just like, well, why didn't you tell me? And I said, I don't know. Like I told you, all that I have hidden.
Yes.
Do I
Yes.
know it happens? Yes, but I didn't tell. Like I wasn't. I don't know if I was. Yeah, I believe I was afraid to tell.
Yeah.
Um, my mama is crazy, child.
I think in that moment that would have been a good thing.
Yes, and so that is what it was. And so I said I was afraid to tell,
Yes.
but I'm okay. And so that was it. It wasn't too big of a discussion, but she knew that I needed to go to therapy.
Yes. I think
And
in extreme cases, what ends up happening is people who experience the trauma in the moment and their bodies mentally can't adjust, their minds fracture and separate. And there are a lot of cases or stories that you hear at one point is multiple personality disorder, but dissociative
oh,
identity disorder, where in order to deal with the trauma on an ongoing basis, people's minds fracture so that they compartmentalize. And I guess I read that somebody likened it to having an outer body experience because they just didn't want to be there. And so something else or someone else took over in that moment to absorb whatever was happening while they themselves were in another part of their mind. In extreme cases, that happens. A lot of times it leads to drug addiction, um, alcohol abuse. It leads to all kinds of sexual experiences for the wrong reasons with the wrong people in the wrong ways. Unprotected, having babies left, right, and center, trying to find or reclaim that part of themselves that they can't because they don't know how to say to someone, hey, I was raped when I was 12. Hey, I was raped when I was 8. And that person comes over for dinner every Sunday, that kind of thing. Statistically, it's crazy that the number of, so they're saying like the number of people that are raped by an intimate partner is 26%, the number of people that are raped by a relative, 7%, the number of people that are raped by a friend or acquaintance, 38%, and the number of people that are raped by total strangers, 26. I feel like the number of another relative is a lot higher for the simple fact that, or that number is so low for the simple fact that people don't say anything. 7% seems really low to me. Like, unless you're
7%
tying in,
is extremely low.
right, unless you're tying like relative, friend, acquaintance, so that would be, you know, Uncle John, who's not really Uncle John, but you call him
Right,
Uncle John out of respect,
right.
or the pastor who comes over every other Sunday, you know, that kind of thing, then I would kind of lump that number together and then it would be like 45%. But 7% is what's listed for sexual assault being caused by a relative.
What was this friend or acquaintance? Okay. Friend or acquaintance
Friend or
was
acquaintance is
38.
38%. That's the highest. So I'll tell you a crazy story. I remember, and it's really funny in this exact moment, I just remembered it. And his name, I'll tell you in a minute. So when I was 10 or 11, Everett was his name. There was a boy that used to deliver our newspapers, like the Saturday newspaper. And then once every 2 weeks, he would come with these little stubs of paper that told you how much money he was. I'll show you how old I am. Woo, girl. These little stubs of paper that would, like, you'd rip off the bottom like a tab and it would tell you how much you owe the paper boy. Sorry, I'm showing my age. Anyway, so I was home one Saturday, I'm sorry, by myself, and Everett came over with his little flip book with the little stubs of paper at the bottom, you know, and I seen him all the time. And so I was 11, Everett was probably 16, and I was very well developed at 11. I was very, very well developed at 11 years old. And I remember this Saturday I was home by myself and Everett came, you know, to come collect his money. I'm like, you know, my mom's not here. I don't have any money for you. And so we were just chit-chatting in the door and I'm like, okay, well, I got to go. And Samantha, as I went to close the door, he jammed his foot in the door. And I'm like, he's like, I want to come in and talk to you. I'm like, you can't. And I remember him grabbing me and pulling me towards him and like kissing on my face and touching my breast. I remember he shoved his hand down my pants and I grabbed his hand to try, like, and I'm 11 at probably 5'2", 5'3", wrestling with this man-sized boy, because he was probably 6'1". And in my mind, I remember panicking and remember thinking like, oh my God, you know, it's that moment where you're like, is this really happening? You know, I remember like I'm screaming and I'm telling him to stop and I'm thinking like, we lived in an apartment building. I'm like, okay, can one of the neighbors hear me? Like, is anybody there? Can somebody come? And I remember we basically wrestled to the floor for me to try to get this guy's hands out of my pants and for him to just stop touching me. And I managed to like push and kick him enough that he was out the door and I was able to shut the door and lock it. And I remember hearing him on the other side of the door saying that he was sorry, he just opened the door, he wanted to talk to me. 11
Hell
years old.
no. That's scary.
Yeah. And this was somebody that was like a friend or acquaintance. Like this is our paper boy. Every week I saw him, and a couple of times during the week I saw him. You know what I mean? I was in middle school. He was in the high school across the road. So it's like I saw him all the time. Would never think, you know, a paper boy would try to like fondle me. Oh, that's crazy.
Oh, child. I'm
That is a
sure if all the ladies gathered together and talked,
yes,
we would have the commonality of that.
yes, yeah,
And I used to think, I was like, oh, and I know not every woman has dealt with that, but I feel like it's a high percentage of women who
there
have.
is. And if even if every woman hasn't, she knows someone who has.
Right,
Someone in her family has,
right.
which is crazy. I know. I'll tell you another. I got all kinds of crazy stories. I remember one year I was going to go to Jamaica with a friend of mine, and she said there was an area she wanted to take me to, and I said like, why? There's a man that lives in Jamaica. This is such a sickening story. There's a man that lives in Jamaica who has three daughters, and all three daughters have children for him, and they live in one compound. and the girls were not allowed to go to school. They were homeschooled, and like there's so much more to it. But I was like, I don't understand how no one has gone over there. And sorry, unlike the father who killed his son, but in my mind, I'm thinking, why hasn't anybody gone over there and like put two gunshots in his backside? You have three girl children, three daughters. Their mom had died, and this man systematically just continued to have sex with the girls, and they all had children for him. I think one had three and the others had two.
Well, you know that that's not uncommon, though. I've heard of that before, and I know this man wasn't in Jamaica.
Right.
He was of other descent.
Okay. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
this story alone, I had to put it away and then go back and read it because it was a lot.
Yes.
It was a lot. And then I had to think. I thought about it all day today. Like, what I was telling you. He just probably saw the colors of the rainbow and didn't even think twice to
Yeah.
rationalize this is my son. So, whew, to be the mother and that family at this moment,
Yeah.
I just pray for a mild child.
Yeah. Because I mean, for him, for the little girl, she's lost her dad because he is now going to spend the rest of his life behind bars. And even if there was leniency, he would still have to go to an institution for the criminally insane or something, in which case he'd still be incarcerated for the rest of his life. So she has lost her brother. She has lost her father. She has to deal with the trauma of being molested at 3 years old and growing up with all of this knowledge, and then growing up in a community where people know all of this. And so
And
someone is going
social
to look at her.
media.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. I pray for her.
So, what
I,
are the steps to recovery for trauma for someone who has gone through any sort of trauma?
I believe, like, with anything, this is not even trauma, realizing that it happened, actually realizing and like, oh shit, this really did happen to me. Speaking about it, speaking to someone about it, whether it be through counseling or somebody that you trust, like, this happened. This happened to me. Then getting help, I feel like speaking to a therapist and working through those things. Then at some point, I'm sure in therapy, you'll talk to the people closest to you and maybe talking to them and telling them in an area where you feel safe because
Yes.
you weren't safe when it happened.
Right.
You want to be in a safe space to be able to tell what happened and not be judged.
Right. Do you think it would be valuable, useful in any way to? Okay, so there was a story on social media where a woman was raped. She confronted her accuser and she publicly forgave her accuser. So, not going to that extreme, but would it be useful to also have a therapeutic conversation with somebody who's a third party, with the people, let's say, who didn't believe you, didn't protect you, didn't do anything about it?
Yes, everybody involved. So family members said, people who did not believe you if you did tell. It needs to be in a safe environment though, where you feel safe in telling your story and this is what happened to me. So yes, I do feel like that should happen. Now, as far as your accuser, uh, that's depending upon what your therapist say, child. Because I know that is a part of healing, but sometimes you don't have to confront your accuser. Sometimes you can write a letter and burn it, and that may
Right.
not work for this particular whatever. Depending upon what your therapist say, child. Because I
Right.
am not a therapist,
Right.
but sometimes writing a letter and burning it, I don't know, child. I don't know. I write a letter and burned it. That's what
Yeah.
I did.
I think me personally, I don't know that I could get to a level of forgiveness for someone who took advantage of me knowingly. I think for me, my level of forgiveness is accepting that it happened, accepting who the person was that committed it, accepting their shitty behavior, and then letting it go.
Agreed. I'm not trying to be your BFF by the
Right.
poolside. That's
I
not.
don't want to see you. I don't want to talk
No,
to you. I don't want to hear
no,
you tell me that you're sorry.
no. I don't need that.
Yeah.
The healing is me.
Yes.
I, what you did, you can stay over there. But
Right.
I do want to recognize that it happened and
Right.
who it was, what happened. Let's bring the people that are closest to me, my family. Let's talk
Yes.
about it
Yes.
and go forward. But I don't need to be face to
Right.
face with you. But
And then
that's me.
no, but it's true. But I think the biggest part of it too is accepting that it wasn't your fault and knowing
Yeah,
that this isn't your burden to shoulder. This was someone else's dirty behavior towards you.
right.
You are a victim. You are not to blame for what happened. Not the way that you dressed, not the way that you hugged them, not the way that you kissed them on the cheek when you said goodnight, not the way
Period.
that you sat on their lap and read a story to
Right.
them. Not none of it was your fault because you were a child, they were an adult, they were in the right presence of mind to know that what they were doing was wrong and they took advantage of you. Part of the problem, I think, is that for a lot of people, what they struggle with is knowing that they are not at fault and embracing that entirely. Somewhere in their mind, they've convinced themselves that even in the most minute way, they've done something that caused this person to
But
do
you
what
know
they.
why? Not even just social media, in the media, how we talk about it in the community. So, regardless if I know that it wasn't my fault, but if I hear so and so talk about it that's close to me, aunt, cousin, mom, dad, saying, well, this little girl shouldn't be dressed like that and sitting on his lap.
Right. Right. Right.
So then now I'm going to think, well, dang, I was sitting on so and so's lap. I shouldn't have been doing that when there was nothing that I did wrong.
Right. Right. Listen to me. You could be wearing a suit of armor and sitting on somebody's lap on top of 10 stacks of books, and you're still going to get blamed.
Look, child, I had boobs at the age of 12.
Yeah.
One summer had boobs. And so this is not even sexual. You know, men, they like boobs. It don't matter on what set of body it's
Right.
on and what age they gonna look.
Right.
And so I used to be ashamed, but my mother was like, and my grandma was like, child, they ain't going nowhere. So it doesn't matter if I had on a turtleneck.
Right. Right. You
They
could wear,
still
like I
gonna look
said,
at them.
a suit of
And I mean,
armor.
and they still gonna look.
Yeah. 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 I remember when I was 14, my cousin, who's probably 24 at the time, commented on my ass. And Samantha, for the rest of the summer, I wore shirts, my brother's oversized shirts that came down to the back of my knees, just so that you couldn't see my ass. Because somewhere inside of me, I felt embarrassed and sickened and knew that him looking at me was not okay. But I took that as my fault because I had on a pair of fitted jeans that some bell bottom. Again, I'm holding myself, but I had on bell bottom jeans. I had on bell bottom jeans that were fitted because that's the style that was wearing. Like I wasn't thinking about nobody. I was going outside to go hang out with my friends. And I was 13 going on 14. And he made that comment. I was like, ugh. And I wore long shirts literally to the back of my knees until I don't even know, probably till I was like 16, just out of embarrassment. And that feeling like something wasn't wrong, but I must have provoked him in some kind of way because I had the jeans on. So he saw my ass.
There you go. Whew. Child, my God. That took a lot out of me. That was like a deep conversation,
Yeah, it was a very
but it
heavy.
was needed. It was
It
needed.
was a good conversation. It was heavy. But
Yeah.
if you could impart anything on our listeners before we get to talking about to some lighter and funner stuffs. Um, Anybody who is listening to this who has suffered some sort of trauma and they are scared to talk to someone, what would be your advice to them if they're out there listening?
Child, talk to somebody. If you're in Dallas, Texas, baby, I have an awesome therapist. Okay. Um, and I know in the Black community, now it's becoming the in thing to go to therapy.
Yes.
But there is nothing wrong with talking to somebody.
Say that again for the people. Say that again.
There is nothing wrong with going to the therapist. I enjoy it because it's somebody that doesn't know me that can listen to me talk and
Yes.
figure things out.
Yes. And they're objective. And because they don't know you, they're objective. They don't have any ulterior motive because they're not entrenched in your life. They can hear you with both of their ears and they can comprehend because there isn't anything blocking the information that they're receiving from you.
Find somebody that you can speak to because you have to find your right therapist.
Yes.
But get to a space where you want to talk to somebody because you got to talk about it, because if you keep it inside,
it'll wreck you.
Baby,
it'll wreck you.
Keep it inside, it affects your body. Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. You might not be able to lose weight. You might be overeating. It can affect your hormones, which can affect I'm talking to the women,
yes.
which can affect your cycles.
Yes.
And you may not be able to reproduce if you're trying to have kids.
Yes.
You can lose your hair because you're stressed out.
Yeah.
There's so many things. Anxiety. People already have anxiety, but you could have anxiety.
Yep.
You might be depressed.
Yep.
There are a lot of things that could happen when you hold stuff in, and that's just not with what happened to you. That's with everything. And so if you're not speaking about what happened to you, you're holding everything that's happened to you in. And do you know where we hold everything at? In our womb. So, ladies,
yeah.
Let's talk to someone.
Something that you said stuck out, that it could affect you with reproducing. But further to that, if you have children, it could affect your relationship with your children.
Yes.
It could deeply affect your relationship with your children, especially if you have girl children. Not that it wouldn't affect your relationship with you. It could affect your relationship with your sons as well, because then you're side-eyeing, what your sons are doing when they're playing with their little sister, or you're side-eyeing when your son is playing with the neighbor's daughter, or you're projecting unnecessarily your trauma onto your kids, and it's preventing you from developing a healthy relationship with your children. It prevents you from developing a healthy relationship with another human being, with the person that wants to have a relationship with you. It affects you from developing social relationships. It affects you. You may not think that it's going to, and you may not think that it does, but for anybody that's listening, if you've gone through any sort of trauma like this, sexual trauma, take stock of the relationships that you have and how close you are to those people, how much you've divulged about yourself to those people, how much they truly know about you, and what the limitations of your relationships are.
And I like to always say, and this is with anything that you go through, you got to sit in your shit. Sit in your shit, realize that you are in your shit.
Yep.
Smell it and get out. It stinks.
Yep.
Then you got to make the necessary steps to get out your shit. And until you do that, you're going to be a shitty mess.
And leaving your shit all over the place.
Shit all over the place.
All over the place. Yeah.
We don't want that. Not in 2020 and not today.
No. And we also don't want unhealthy people raising more unhealthy people. right? If you know that something has happened to you, be the one to break that cycle. If you know it's happened to you, it's happened to your mom, it's happened to your aunts, your grandmother, and everybody that came before you, I know that it's probably a huge task and a huge burden, but be the one to break that cycle. You know,
But that's a
don't
part
continue.
of, sorry,
That's
that
okay.
is a part of like healing.
Yes,
Because, like you said, projection. If we do not heal, we have kids, we project our fears onto our kids,
absolutely.
and then so on and so forth. It's a
Yes.
cycle. And so when we realize that shit, I fucked up, I need some help, I need to talk to somebody.
Hmm.
And then we become enlightened and we get the help that we need, it stops with us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
Break that cycle. Girl. Oh my goodness. It was such an intense and wonderful and beautiful conversation. And I thank you so much for being so open with what's happened to you and for sharing your experiences. I
Thank
appreciate you for that.
you.
So, on to stuff that's a little bit more lighthearted. What is going on with this fantastic jewelry, Miss Lady, Miss
Oh,
Ma'am, and all these creative things that it's going on?
baby. Okay, so I have a ring line called She Gabby. She Gabby is the ring speaks for itself. Before you enter into the room, the ring speaks. People are asking about this ring. They
Mm-hmm.
want this ring. Everyone wants this ring. And it started out as, oh, I had seen like similar rings.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, I can do that. I get on Amazon, I start looking and buying stuff. So I was making the rings for myself. As the packages were rolling in, I was making the ring like, oh, okay, this is cute. I happened to take a little video and put it on social media, but I wasn't trying to sell them. I, in
Right.
fact, went to my friend's house. I made her a ring. And I'm like, oh, I ain't selling this shit. That's exactly what I said. But she didn't say anything. She acted like she didn't hear me. And so I came back home, went to bed, woke up, and had like 6 orders. And
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah, but I
and
didn't
normally
advertise this.
all I did was put a video. And I wasn't even
Nice.
trying to say, I just said rings by me, but I'm always creating something.
Right.
So then when somebody asked me what the price was, it just rolled off my lips. And so I was like, okay, God, I guess I'm going to be making rings. And I'm like, I'm still shocked that people want these things.
They're beautiful.
Thank you.
I don't
Thank
know if you've looked at your rings. They're beautiful.
I have. And I'm
Okay.
like, I can't believe that like this is a thing.
Yes.
And so it's a thing. And like one, I think it was the first weekend, I made like $300 that
Good
week.
for you.
And another thing, I was feeling down this week. And not really about making the rings. I just was like, ugh, what am I gonna do? I need to, because as you're new in business, you got to put
Yes.
money into it. So you
Mhm.
don't really see the return because
Right.
you're trying to buy more supplies and whatnot.
Yes.
And so I'm like, okay, it's getting ready to be Christmas time. I'm sure people are going to want to order and whoop the whoop and bloop bloop bloop. This lady, and I met her through social media.
Mhm.
Della LaShawn. Girl, she lives in LA. And she just wears the clairvoyant ring, the clear one, all around town. She
Okay.
be amongst the millionaires, baby.
Okay.
So she said that she wore, in fact, I got a message today that she had wore it last night with this lady. She was on Beyond the Pole, which was on, what was it? VH1. It was on one of them channels. And she was on that show. But the lady is like a millionaire.
Oh,
And
damn.
she wanted a ring. You hear me?
Hello.
She wanted a ring. And so I'm like, oh my God, this is a thing. And
It
so
is a
I knew
thing.
that it was from that God was telling me to do it
Yes.
because it was
Mm-hmm.
It came so quick. People were just wanting these things, and this is not something that I was trying to do. I
Right.
was making it for myself. Girl, I feel like I make rings. And so now I'm being more intentional about the stones that I use,
Nice.
doing research on that, and of course,
Nice.
different healing properties of the crystals that I use.
Mhm. So
Girl,
you make
yeah,
art. You make art. You're not making rings. You're creating art.
I'm creating art.
There you go.
Look, be on the lookout for the good old website. It won't come till 2020
That's okay.
because right now my focus is on school.
And what are you doing in school?
I'm going to be a medical coder and biller. That makes the money
Okay.
these days.
Well, you know
Like,
what? Your new entrepreneurial business will help to fund anything else that you're going to do. And listen to me. You'll have your degree and you'll have your business, and those two things work hand in hand. And you are a creative spirit. So having your business and creating your art and having your art worn all over the country. All right, then. Good luck. So where can people find these beautiful rings, these beautiful pieces of art? Where can they purchase them?
right now, you can hit me up on my good on where am I? On Instagram.
Instagram.
Child, I don't be knowing. I'm so old. Well, I act so old. At S. Dot Marie, that's me.
Okay. Yep.
SDOTMARIEDATSME. It's super long, I know.
And I'll put that information in the
In the
uh
description
this yeah
below.
description, right, definitely, so people can just click on it and get right to your page.
And like I said, there will be a website coming which will have the details of what rings I have available, what you can choose from. And I think I need to really hurry up and do that. I
You do.
was told I need to hurry up and do that.
You do.
So I'm going to make that a point.
Okay. Well, do you have any upcoming events? Is there anything that you would like to let my listeners know about that you have coming up?
I don't have any upcoming events. I just kind of what I've been doing is putting a pause on the podcast and the blogging because I have to finish these classes because they
Yes.
taking this money out of my account.
Yes.
All of that will be there when I complete these
That's
classes, which I'm hoping in March.
okay.
And so in
That's
March,
just
when
around
I
the
shall
corner.
return, exactly.
That's just
So
around the
when I return, the podcast will be up and running. The blog, the Real Girlfriend Experience with
and
an
the
X will
website.
be back.
Okay.
And my rings and things, She
Yes.
Gabby, will be up
Yes.
and running as well.
Okay, perfect. Well, we are going to wrap things up, but I wanted to thank you again for being here to share this emotionally heavy conversation with me, and also for ending it on a really great light note and talking about your art and your creative endeavors and about school, and the great things that you have going on. For the people, if you can just let them know one more time who you are and where they can find you.
Baby, my name is Samantha, and you should already know me. And if you don't, hi.
Ask somebody.
Correct. Okay? Because I will be seen in these streets.
Yes.
You can find me at s.marie. That's me on Instagram, but also the Real Girlfriend Experience with an X on Instagram too, as well
Yes.
as on Facebook. I'm on. I say I have a Twitter, but I don't be
You're
on
not
that
really on there
thing.
too much. Yeah.
Yeah, it's too much social medias. It's a lot. It's a lot. You know, I'm on Facebook, I'm on the Instagram, and barely on Twitter. But
Yes.
that's where you can find me.
Okay. And I am AJ Badass Jones, your host, the host of the Pum Pum Chronicles. You can find me on Instagram at the Pum Pum Chronicles Pod. You can also follow my personal page at badass underscore Jones underscore. I am on Twitter, but much like Samantha, I don't really get around there too often, but I am at Tpp Chronicles. Do I have a Facebook page for? I do, but I don't. It's not really. Instagram is primarily it. I also have a YouTube channel, which is the Pum Pum Chronicles Pod. Every Wednesday night, we do a live Wet Wednesdays where we have some adult discussions about a number of different things. If you ever want to send an email about any topics that you want me to cover, any questions that you may have, you can email me at thepumpumchronicles@gmail.com. And that is it for us. Boop, boop, boop. Big up yourself, Sam. Samantha.